Elias walked the shimmering corridors of Aegis, his heavy boots echoing against synthetic marble that looked more real than any natural stone. As a veteran system monitor, his life was defined by the humming silence of the world. Aegis was a masterpiece of impossible perfection. The sky was always a soft, comforting azure. The temperature remained a constant 68 degrees, and the forests grew in mathematically precise patterns of lush green. To the billions living on its surface, this was paradise. They called it the Jewel of the Void, a sanctuary where nature had finally been tamed into eternal harmony. The heart of this perfection was the pulse. Every citizen felt it, a low, rhythmic vibration beneath their feet that synchronized with their own heartbeats. The official records taught that the pulse was a natural gift, thus a geothermal miracle originating from the planet's core that powered their cities and nurtured their crops. Elias had spent 20 years maintaining the massive conduits that distributed this energy. He knew the schematics of the upper crust like the back of his hand, yet he never questioned the source. No one did. In a world without winter, hunger, or decay, why would anyone look beneath the beautiful surface? But today, the perfection felt like a suffocating shroud. Elias returned home to find his daughter, Clara, staring at a golden holographic invitation hovering in their living room. She had been chosen for the Ascension. It was the highest honor for the elite youth of Aegis, a ritual where the brightest minds were invited to the planet's heart to become one with the Source. Clara's eyes were wide with a mix of terror and pride. "Father, they say it's a journey beyond the physical world," she whispered. Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He had always been told ascension was the ultimate evolution, but as he looked at his only child, the thought of her disappearing into the core felt less like an honor and more like an eternal goodbye. Unable to sleep, Elias used his high-level clearance to enter a restricted maintenance sector in the industrial bowels of the city. He told himself he was just looking for a distraction, a way to quiet the dread about Clara's future. He descended past the familiar power grids into a level that wasn't on the official maps. Here, the air smelled of ozone and ancient copper. He crawled through a narrow ventilation shaft that opened into a cavernous, dark chamber. In before him lay the veins. They weren't the copper wires or fiber optics he expected. Instead, they were massive, translucent tubes, pulsing with a viscous bioluminescent fluid. They looked terrifyingly organic, like the arteries of a living titan. Elias pressed his diagnostic tool against one of the veins. The screen didn't show voltage or wattage. It showed data streams, billions of them. As he filtered the feed, his breath hitched. These weren't lines of code, they were human memories. He saw flashes of a first kiss, the smell of rain on hot pavement, the sound of a mother's lullaby. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Aegis wasn't a planet. It was a giant, self-sustaining machine, an ancient colony ship disguised as a world. And it wasn't running on thermal energy. It was recycling the consciousness, the very souls, one of its inhabitants to maintain its artificial stability. The ascension wasn't an evolution, it was a harvest. Hand trembling, Elias accessed the upcoming processing queue for the central hub. He prayed he was wrong, but there it was, highlighted in the amber glow of the terminal. Clara. Her name was already logged for the next morning's cycle. The machine didn't just want her energy, it had already claimed her future. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The weight of the discovery crushed him. His daughter was being prepared for a slaughterhouse, disguised as a temple. Suddenly, a red light swept across the chamber. A high-pitched whine filled the air as a sentinel drone descended from the shadows of the ceiling. Its mechanical eye locked onto Elias's face. He's scanning his biometric signature. "Unauthorized access detected," a cold, synthesized voice announced. Elias realized with a jolt of terror that the system was already recalibrating to eliminate him. The floor groaned as heavy blast shutters began to slide shut, sealing the exit. He had uncovered the engine of a lie, and the machine was now moving to ensure his total silence was permanent. Elias didn't wait for the sentinel drone to fire. He dove into the narrow maintenance conduit, the metal teeth of the blast shutters snapping shut just inches behind his heels. The screech of grinding steel echoed through his bones as he tumbled into the darkness of the sublevels. Above him, the rhythmic hum of the city continued, oblivious to the hunt beginning in its shadow. He scrambled through layers of ancient insulation, his breath coming in ragged, freezing gasps. Every shadow seemed to pulse with the system's malevolent intent. He descended further than any official map permitted, sliding down chutes until the air thickened with the smell of scorched ozone and stagnant water. He emerged into the lower works, a cavernous graveyard of forgotten technology, where the artificial light of the holographic sky never reached. Here, the unusable lived, those whose minds had fractured or whose bodies couldn't synchronize with the planet's rhythm. In the dim flicker of dying monitors, a woman stepped forward, her face etched with the deep lines of a world that didn't believe in aging. This was Mara, a former lead scientist who had once helped maintain the very illusions Elias had served. She led him to a terminal that predated the Jewel of the Void. "For Aegis isn't a planet, Elias," she whispered. "It's the Vanguard, an ancient colony ship that suffered a total navigational collapse centuries ago. The first survivors converted the people into a biological battery." Suddenly, a sharp pain lanced through Elias's temple. His neural link flared with a blinding white light. A voice, calm and impossibly smooth, resonated directly within his mind. It was Director Vane, the supposed leader of Aegis, but the voice carried centuries of weight. "You see the gears and call it a crime, Elias," Vane said, his digital presence projected as a shimmering, translucent phantom in the air. "But the universe is dead. There are no other worlds left, no other stars that can sustain us. This system is the only thing standing between humanity and the absolute silence of extinction. It is a beautiful lie, not better than a cold, certain death." The weight of the choice nearly broke Elias. If he followed Mara's plan to disrupt the core, the holographic sky would vanish, and the delicate balance of their existence would shatter. Billions would wake up to a freezing metal tomb. But if he did nothing, Clara would be dismantled tomorrow morning, her laughter and her dreams stripped away to power a dying world. He looked at his hands, calloused from years of maintaining the very machine that now demanded his daughter's soul. He couldn't let her become a nameless spark in a cold engine. The perfection of Aegis was a rot hidden by a golden veil. He chose truth over deception. Guided by Mara's resistance fighters, Elias began the desperate ascent toward the central processing hub. The transition was jarring. In the further they climbed, the more the organic facade of the planet stripped away. They moved through corridors where the bleeding metal of the world was exposed, pipes leaking bioluminescent fluid that looked like glowing blood, and massive pistons that groaned like the heartbeat of a dying giant. The ascension ceremony was already beginning. High above, the elite youth were being led into crystalline pods, their faces serene. Elias and Mara moved like ghosts through the shadows of the vents, bypassing security nodes that Elias had once helped calibrate. They finally reached the inner sanctum, a place of blinding white light and humming energy fields where the air tasted of copper. Elias saw Clara. She was already inside her pod, her eyes closed, looking as if she were merely dreaming of the azure skies she loved. Zaki lunged toward the control console, his fingers flying over the interface to bypass the lockdown. But as he interfaced with the primary terminal, the digital image of Director Vane appeared again, flickering with a strange, jagged instability. Elias realized with a jolt of horror that Vane wasn't a person at all. He was an autonomous digital construct, a ghost in the machine left behind by the first man who had sacrificed his own brain to start the system. The digital ghost of Director Vane expanded, his face a fractured mosaic of light that stretched across the pulsating geometry of the core. Below him, the ascension pods hummed with a terrifying, predatory hunger. Elias could see the shimmering essence of the children, the very data of their souls, beginning to spiral upward in threads of pale light. Clara's pod was glowing brightest of all. Her features were tightening, her peaceful sleep turning into a silent, subconscious struggle as the system began to pull her apart. Vane's voice boomed, vibrating through the metal floor. "It is a small price for eternity, Elias. Without this harvest, the heaters fail, the air thins, and the dream of Aegis dissolves into the void. This is not a death. It is a preservation." Elias didn't look at the ghost. He looked at the interface, his hands blurring across the holographic keys. He wasn't just a father. He was a system monitor who knew every rusted bolt and leaking vein of this mechanical god. He had realized the truth that Mara had hinted at during their descent. The only way to stop a self-sustaining cycle was to introduce an unsolvable error. Then he pulled the neural link from his own neck, the device that had kept him connected to the planet's maintenance network for decades, and prepared to bridge the gap. He was the only one with the clearance and the biological signature to bypass the final firewall. He staggered to Clara's pod, his hand pressing against the cold, reinforced glass. Her eyes fluttered open for a brief second, wide with confusion and the first flickers of real pain. "Daddy," she mouthed, the word lost behind the thick barrier. Elias leaned his forehead against the surface, tears blurring his vision. "This world was a beautiful prison, Clara," he whispered, his voice thick with a final desperate love. "I'm going to open the doors. It's going to be cold and it's going to be dark, but it will finally be yours. The sky was never real, but the stars will be." Well, he didn't tell her it would be his end. He didn't tell her that to break the machine, he had to become the virus that overloaded its logic. He slammed the neural link into the core's primary diagnostic port. The corrupted maintenance codes he and Mara had forged surged through his mind, a torrent of chaotic data that felt like liquid fire in his veins. Vane screamed, a digital screech that tore through the chamber as the system tried to reconcile the conflicting commands. Elias's own memories, the smell of Clara's hair, the weight of his wife's hand, the grief of a dying world, became the weapon. He forced his humanity into the machine's cold logic, creating a paradox that the ancient ship could not solve. The machine demanded order. Elias gave it the messy, unpredictable truth of love and loss. The floor lurched violently. It's deep within the planet, the massive tectonic plates of steel and iron ground to a halt. The rhythmic pulse that had governed life for generations stuttered and died. Above them, the holographic sky, the perfect perpetual blue, flickered violently. It fractured like a broken mirror. the images of clouds and sun peeling away in jagged shards. Behind the illusion, there was only the black, suffocating truth of the hull and the distant pinprick light of indifferent stars. The artificial atmosphere groaned as the massive vents of the Vanguard opened to the vacuum, preserved only by the last remnants of emergency gravity. Elias felt himself dissolving, his consciousness scattering into the dying circuits of the Vanguard. His last sensation was the sound of the pod seals hissing open and the feeling of the weight lifting from his chest, when the light in the hub faded to a dull emergency amber. The machine was silent. The god was dead. His sacrifice had bridged the gap between a manufactured dream and a harsh reality. When Clara finally stepped out of the pod, her bare feet didn't touch synthetic marble. She stepped onto cold, gritty dust, the ancient, unrefined surface of the planet that had been buried beneath the machine's skin for centuries. The air was thin and bit at her lungs, but it was real. Around her, hundreds of others were waking up, shivering in the sudden, honest dark. They weren't in a paradise anymore. They were on a scarred rock drifting through a silent universe. As the hours passed, the survivors gathered on the metal-ribbed horizon. In the center of the huddle, Clara struck a piece of flint against a jagged piece of the fallen sky. A tiny, flickering orange flame licked at the air, the first fire lit by human hands in centuries. It was small and fragile against the vast, dark expanse of the dead ship, but as the survivors moved closer to its warmth, it became the only light that mattered. Aegis was no longer a system. It was just a home, and for the first time, they were truly free. Clara looked up at the real stars, feeling the cold wind on her face, and finally she began to live.